wanted to make a video about this because this specific leak is kind of interesting. At first glance, you see the water starting to flow through right here. The first thought that comes to your head is the wax ring has to be leaking. And if you didn't give it too much thought, you would run and buy a wax ring, you would come back and you would have the same problem. You can see this has got fluid master fill valve and flush valve. You can tell they got a little age just by the color. And these units have about a 5-year warranty, which means it should last around 5 years. Could last 7, could last 10, but it's only guaranteed 5 years. When I came in here, there was a puddle of water right here, and the toilet wasn't flushed in a long time. If the toilet hasn't been flushed, this is the only thing that's got steady water. Sometimes the ring and this supply line will go bad, and you'll get a leak from there. But there's only 2 working parts, or 3 working parts that actually make your toilet work. If you put a new handle, if you put a new fill valve, and you put a new flush valve, you got a brand new toilet. And usually you can buy all 3 of those for around 20 and 30 bucks for all of them. Get back to our leak. I noticed 1 drop of water on this little screw here, which was enough for me to wonder where the water was coming from. So I did some looking and searching, and you can barely see it in this video, but right through here you can definitely see it at the back. Now if the water was coming from the wax ring, how did it get up here? And if the water is getting through the back here, it makes sense why we're just getting water flow through here. Right, water moves, and sometimes, and this can happen like in your roof too, under the floor. Just because you see water here doesn't mean that's where the leak came from. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the tank. We're gonna put a new flush valve or new gasket. So all of our bolts and our gaskets are new. All right, as you can see, I turned the water off. I flushed the toilet, so the majority of the water is out of the tank. You can take a shot back and suck the rest out if you wanted to. But there's only these 3 flathead bolts that hold the tank in, and we're gonna loosen the water line from the fill valve. And then you just wanna get, I think these are 14 millimeter. So you just need a 14 millimeter and a flathead. You can pull this off. All right, we got all 3 of those nuts off. We got the water line loose. All we gotta do now is come here and just pull straight up on it. Just come straight up now. I'm gonna grab it with 2 hands off camera. And I guess we found the source of our leak. It's the tank, the bowl gasket right here. Like I said, it's just normal wear and tear. 5 or 7 years, it's time to replace it. When you pop this off, I'm gonna pop it off with a screwdriver. You do not want your hands on this. Most of these gaskets, if you touch them, they'll leave black streaks everywhere. So you want to try to just throw this away without touching it. Usually when I want to loosen this nut, I use the big oil filter pliers I showed you before in the last shower video. But I left them at home today working on the transmission, so I'm going to show you another trick. You take the screwdriver and you want to catch it right on the corner of the threads. Tap the end of the screwdriver. I use that little nail puller. Tap, tap, tap. Come around and just keep tapping it until you loosen it up. And we're gonna do the same thing to tighten. We got all of the bolts out and we got the old flush valve out. This is a kind of important next step. So you wanna put your bolt, you wanna put a metal washer, a rubber washer. Then we're gonna go through and hit it with the pipe dope. The rubber washer, metal washer, and that'll hold this tight and prevent any leaks in the future. And I'll show you what that looks like. We got the pipe dope on. You can see by adding the pipe dope, it just adds an extra layer of protection to prevent leaks in the future. Every time I've did this and used pipe dope, I've never had a problem with leaks later until they wear out like this one has. It's not like this on every set, but on this specific set, you notice you have 1 skinny nut and 1 thick nut. And the skinny nut goes to the tank, and the thick nut will go to the bottom to hold the whole thing together. All right, we got our rubber washer. We'll take our metal washer. All right, I'm gonna Take 2 hands now just so we don't spread the pop dope everywhere. The secret to tighten this down is you want it snug, but you don't want it so tight that the edges of the rubber washer start to pick up. Alright, so I'm gonna repeat that same process for the other 2 bolts. Right now it's time to put in the fill valve. I'm gonna just loosen this nut off. I try to stay between the 2 bolts like this and like almost the center. We'll flip it and we're gonna do the little trick I showed you with the screwdriver to finish it off. We got that tightened down. We're gonna take this gasket, and this gasket just slides right over the top. Once we got our gasket in place, it's time to put it back together. All right, you can see right now we just got it sitting here. We go through and put the bolts in kind of tight, but you don't want it too tight. If you over tighten this, you got a chance you can crack this tank and you have to buy a whole new toilet. Got our water line connected. We've got all of our screws snug. This holds our tank to our bowl. So the next step is go in and connect your chain for your flush handle. And then the last step, I'm going to remove this paper around the flapper, the piece of cardboard. We're going to connect the rubber hose that goes back to the fill valve to the flush valve. Alright, and you can see right now we flushed it a few times and it's pretty dry. It's kind of tricky. It looked like the water was coming from the wax ring, but it was really coming from the tank to bowl connections. So that's just something to look out for.